And hello, fourth and long fans. It's your AFL correspondent, Coach Donnie Hess here with another one of my interview series. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I happen to know this gentleman quite well. He is actually one of my players here for the Des Moines Roosters and a very good friend of mine, Mr. Brad Croston. Brad, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Donnie. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome, awesome. It is good to see you, sir. Well, you and I know each other quite well. I mean, I've had the chance to the luxury of coaching you this last year, the year
Oh,
before.
thanks.
Um, but I think our fans would love to know who Brad Croston is a little bit outside of footy.
Yeah, well, I'm a hardworking guy. Not doing a whole lot right now. I'm a college dropout, but I'm still young, so I've got a long ways to go. Like you said, you and I know each other pretty well. I play footy for the Des Moines Roosters. We'll kind of get into that a little bit more. But growing up, I was big on soccer and baseball. Those were the two sports I really played. So I was never really much into playing American football or anything like that, which is kind of weird for somebody that's playing a full-on tackle sport. But it's really interesting. So that's that's kind of a little bit of a background of me. Soccer and baseball have been the two that I've been really into.
Yeah, so that's really cool, and I think you and I always have a lot of fun chatting different sports and stuff like that,
Absolutely.
which is a real kick I get whenever we do have trainees, different stuff like that. So I got to ask you, okay, you've been playing footy with me, and I think you joined before I actually started taking over as coaching. So how did you find footy? Did you find footy before the Roosters, and kind of what's your little story of getting into it?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to around 2012 or 2013. I can't remember because the first game that I saw was the Sydney Swans. They were playing Hawthorn in the grand final in 2012, and I can't remember if it was the live version of it or if it was like a classic game or whatever. But I remember I was just sitting on the couch, just kind of flip flopping through channels on the TV, and I come across AFL Grand Final, and I'm like, okay, I'll go ahead and turn this on. So I turn it on and I kind of watch it for a little while, and I think to myself two things. I'm like, one, what the hell is this? Two, how can I get going with it? Because this is so cool. I think just the crazy organized chaos nature of the game, and kind of as I started to get to know it a little bit better, just realizing how much raw athleticism you need to play the game well. I mean, you have to have stamina, you have to have strength, you have to have ball skills, you have to have coordination. And kind of as I've gotten into playing footy and watching it more, it's just being in awe of just how well trained these guys are and just how good of athletes they are. I mean, I think a lot of people in the States don't recognize just how good of athletes people who play Australian rules football are. So, kind of going off of the 2012 grand final, I watched that a little bit. I didn't really fall in love with it necessarily right off the bat, but then kind of falling down the YouTube rabbit hole over the next couple of years and discovering like AFL's biggest hits and stuff like that, and big long goals and great passes, and then learning a little bit more about the players and the teams. And then around 2016 was when I started to really start to, I guess back then it would have been a little bit loosely following it, but kind of watching the AFL and getting more and more into players and teams. And I decided to go with Sydney because I remembered that game, and I ended up watching that game back, the 2012 grand final, and just getting to really understand how great of a game that was. And then, sure enough, that year we make the grand final again. We came up short against Western Bulldogs, but I think that really kind of kick-started it for me. And then in the coming years, I started to watch the AFL more, and then I ended up finding the Roosters, and so I started going to trainings with them, and I was just hooked on it. I mean, the first couple of practices, I was bent over on my knees, catching my breath, but that really motivated me to get going a little bit more and start training harder and working more. And then I got to go to my first nationals 2 years ago. I went to the USAFL Nationals in Racine, Wisconsin, and that was so much fun getting to just experience that whole atmosphere and getting to meet everybody and just discover all the different teams, the leagues, and watching a whole wide range of players, and it was just so fun. And it's unfortunate that this year was wiped out, but it's going to be really fun getting back into it next year. I just can't wait to get back onto the field. Like that's what I'm really looking forward to, is just getting back on the field with the guys and getting another game under me.
And a great story. And I think so many similarities amongst a lot of Americans is finding is their YouTube route, or randomly coming upon it on the
Oh yeah.
television. It's always it's kind of an interesting
It's usually
story.
always by accident.
Yeah.
It's like I don't think a lot of Americans are just going to go out and be like, oh, let's look up the weirdest sports ever. Oh, Australian rules football. Let's go with this. But I will say another thing that I have that I'm pretty sure that no one you've interviewed yet has been able to say. But I like to play video games a lot,
Mhm.
and I downloaded AFL Evolution on my Xbox. So that's been another way of me to kind of develop my game IQ and kind of learn more about players and stuff like that. And I created my career and created a player, a personalized player as a forward. And I'm not going to do too much bragging or anything, but I've won 4 Brownlows, 4 Norm Smiths, 4 Colemans, 4 grand finals. So just saying.
Don't you love that creative player? No matter what video
Absolutely.
game, you can always make yourself the best player there. That's awesome. So normally this is the part where I ask the question, "Where's your fandom?" But you kind of already beat me to it. Plus the fact that any of our YouTube listeners, you're rocking the Sydney Swans beanie there.
Yep, I've got some scarves too. I got my 2020 Premiership Club one.
Hmm.
Um, got that. I've got my member beanie. You can kind of see that right there.
Hmm.
Kind of figured go with the beanie just to kind of go with the theme of the weather that's coming around here. Donnie, you know just as well as I do, but at the time that we're recording this, we're going to be experiencing a little bit of a rain snow mix here coming up in the next couple of days. So getting ready for the winter time.
Oh, December in Iowa, how it loves to greet us quite vigorously sometimes.
It,
We've
it
been
loves
we've
to
been a little bit spoiled too.
yeah, it loves to tease us for a little while with a little bit of like low 50s, kind of nice little really nice days, and then all of a sudden, boom, you get a blizzard, and then you have a foot of snow on the ground.
Exactly. So going off that, you kind of showing off some of your swag there. So I gotta ask, what type of footy fan are you? Are you the wake up at 2 a.m. and watch the games, or you kind of watch them on delay? I mean, how would you kind of explain your fandom of the Swans?
I'm about as diehard as they come. I mean, I'm usually not going to be the one to get up at 3:30 to watch a game, but I do get up pretty early for work anyway. So if I'm up early and I can go ahead and just say, all right, I'll get up 30 minutes early and catch the majority of a game. But usually, if we're playing like the first time slot of the day, which is usually about 9:30 or 10:30 Iowa time, um, usually I will get up and watch that. And like if their bounce is at midnight, then I'll go ahead and watch it then. But you and I have talked a little bit about the draft that's been pretty recent, and I think we'll probably talk on that a little bit more. But yeah, I love everything about the Swans. I love everything about the AFL. It's something that's just very unique, and I think it's something that's really really awesome.
And awesome. I mean, like I said, everybody expresses their fandom differently. I know I'm one of the nuts ones. I get up at 2:30. I will set an alarm and get up at 2:30 in the morning to watch any game that's
You're the
on.
breakfast pies for grand final type of guy.
Yeah, anybody that checks me on Twitter, I put that out there that I actually made legitimate Aussie meat pies, but I made a breakfast version for the grand final because the game started at like 2:30 in the morning. So it was definitely a lot of fun. So backing off of that, I'd love to hear this favorite current Swan currently, and have you dove into the history of South Melbourne and Sydney, and do you have an older Swan that maybe captured that you love or enjoy seeing highlights of?
Yeah, so right now it would have to be Buddy Franklin. He's the guy that really catapulted my Swans fandom. I think that if you are trying to build the prototypical fantastic athlete, you would look at Buddy. I mean, he can run fast. He is 6'6" or 7" or however tall he is. He's super strong. He will bowl you over. He can kick from 80 meters out. I mean, he is just the complete package. He's one of the best players that this generation has ever seen. And it's unfortunate that he was injured throughout the majority of the past 2 years. but hopefully we can get him back into a good training schedule and be able to get him back out and play a good majority of the games this upcoming year, because I'd love to see him. All-time favorite, I wouldn't say that I have a whole lot of specific players that I would say are my all-time favorites. Nick Davis is a great one, though. Just the great game that he had against Geelong in 05. I mean, that's one of the all-time classic AFL moments. Tony Lockett, one of the all-time greats, greatest goal kicker of all time. So those are the two that really stand out to me. And also for anybody who might be watching that isn't aware who Nick Davis is, there's a really funny clip of American comedian Conan O'Brien. He was over in Australia doing a whole bunch of different stuff, and he went over to play Australian rules football with the Sydney Swans. And one of his coaches and leaders for the day was Nick Davis. So that's a really, really funny clip for anybody who wants to go give that a watch. That's a great time.
Yeah, that's I remember finding that, and I remember showing it to my wife, and she absolutely just cracked up laughing. Especially there's a part where he has to try to tackle Lewis Melican, and he touches him, and he's like, "You're made out of granite. What is?"
Yeah, he's just holding onto him, and he's just walking around.
Or when they try to teach him how to do a specky, and Isaac Heaney's got the big specky bag on him. He's like, who walks around with the big mustard thing on their back? It is definitely worth a watch. And one of my favorites, and kind of going off of this, and I don't know how much you've dove into it, is one of the all-time greatest, and their MVP medal, Bob Skilton, is another one. If you get a chance to watch his highlights, absolutely insanely good player. He was back in those days when Sydney just could not get to the finals, but he was just such a great player for the club, and he's still connected to the club even at his age now. So another name for you, if you ever want to look it up, is look up the great Bobby Skilton. Is definitely one of those to look at. So
Definitely.
So we kind of talked off that. You and I personally have had a chat about this, but just kind of what were your thoughts about this season? I know it wasn't exactly the greatest when it comes to the win column. Another year without the finals, which I think for some Swans fan gets a little hard, considering we got a little spoiled there. 20 out of 22 years we make the finals in the last 2 years that they haven't. So what are your thoughts of this year's Swans team?
Oh, I think for any AFL fan and any AFL team, it was a really difficult year, just given the fact that it was in a pandemic year. I mean, they played a week and then everything got shut down. So I think it was definitely hard with that. And then you also have to add in the fact that Buddy Franklin was out for the whole year. Luke Parker didn't have a great year. Josh Kennedy got hurt. Isaac Heaney got hurt. I mean, you had all these guys that were getting knocked out of the lineup, and then you had you had some instances where you look at the team and you're like, oh man, this is great, and then there you have those games where you're only putting up 20 points on the board, and you're like, well, this sucks. But I think, at least for me personally, I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan, so I'm a little bit used to failure. So one or two bad years for the Swannies is it's going to happen every now and then, but there's always the chance to look forward. I mean, you've got all these young guys, like especially the guys we just drafted. They're looking really, really good. Young guys in the team like Dylan Stevens, like Nick Blakey, Isaac Heaney to an extent. So you have all these guys that right now are right about to hop over into the next category of player. I mean, you have Isaac Heaney, like I was just mentioning. I mean, right before he got hurt, he was playing really well. I mean, like the first game of the year before the shutdown, I mean, he went and played one of the best games he's ever played. So you look at all these guys who are really young and trying to make a name for themselves in the AFL, and that gives you a lot of confidence. I mean, we've got some players in Buddy that's getting older, Kennedy in the midfield. So it's essential that we find the guys that can replace them. I mean, there's no replacing Buddy Franklin, but there's the ability to be able to build and be able to make the team better. So the good thing about having these years that are subpar is that really you can only go up. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of upside in the team. So that's my overall assessment of the year.
Yeah, and I'm completely with you there, and I guess again, this is kind of me going off of it. Is that the only thing about subpar years too is that you're also in the higher end of the draft, which means you bring in more talent. But the scary part about the Swans team is just how young they are. There's so many, like there were several weeks where they were the youngest team in the entire comp each and every week of what they put out, and yet they were still competitive. Very rarely did they get blown out this year, even against some of the better teams. I mean, Richmond, you had the Dimmer Hardwick getting absolutely angry because 10,000 people were behind the ball. It's like, well,
Yeah,
you're playing a better team. You got to do what you got to do to try to keep the game competitive. So, I
yeah.
mean, but let's not go off on that tangent
Mhm.
at all. So swinging from that. So the season is done again. Not such a great year, but so going from that off season, do you keep an eye on the off season? I mean, you just talked about it a little bit as you kept an eye on the draft. Thoughts on their moves in the off season? Tom Hickey coming in as another ruckman. You move out of Lear. There's now talk that maybe Patty McCartan gets a lifeline from the Swans after all of his concussion issues. Kind of what are your thoughts on the Swannies? Do you think they made some good moves? Kind of what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we definitely needed a ruck, and we got that in Tom Hickey. So that was one that we absolutely needed. I think that if we didn't go out in the trade period and get a fresh body in to be able to ruck, then that would have been a failed trade period. So I think in that sense, we definitely got better. Alir was one of those where it's going to be it was it was going to be kind of difficult to replace him because he's one of our only tall players. I mean, we really don't have a whole lot of tall players in the team. And so you and I had talks going into the draft about Denver Granger Barras and having him possibly become that next lockdown defender. But then Logan McDonald slips to 4. And you're like, well, you can't really not take Logan McDonald at 4 if he's gone that far. And that was one of the surprises for me in the draft was Logan McDonald falling to 4, especially the fact that North Melbourne lost Ben Brown. I was thinking that they could bring him in to kind of provide that tall forward role there at North Melbourne. So them not going that way, it was a little bit of a surprise. So I'm really happy that we got Logan McDonald because if you look on his film, his ability to read the ball and see where it's going to come down and use his body to be able to get other guys out of the way and take the strong mark inside 50, that's a really, really good quality to have. So really good that we got him. And I'm also really happy that we were able to get Braden Campbell and Errol Goulden from our academy. That just goes to show the investment that we have in our youth system. And I think anybody that's a diehard sports fan loves to hear the story and see the rise of the young guys going from academies to first teams to becoming superstars. And I mean, we're far away from seeing whether or not these guys are going to become superstars, but it's really fun to be able to see just how good these guys are, how confident the coaching staff is in those guys, and the confidence to be able to say, all right, you're coming into the senior team. So I think all around well done in the trade period and in the draft. So it'll be interesting to see how these guys kind of mesh into the team going forward.
Yeah, and the other good thing about the academy is there's a proven pipeline. Isaac Keeney came from the academy. Callum Mills came from the academy.
Exactly.
There's some really good academy guys, but the other good thing is that they're really good at occasionally finding some rookie draft players. So that's why I'm kind of very interested to see if they give a lifeline to Patty McCartan. Tom McCartan's another youngster that's gotten I'm it's kind of crazy. This draft ended up kind of falling kind of perfectly for the Swans. They get their 2 academy kids. They get the lucky Logan McDonald fall, but I would have been just as happy with Denver Granger Barras because right
Same here.
now Lewis Melican is really our tallest defender that we have, and he's only like 6 foot. So we're not so height wise, but you never know. Like I said, Tommy McCartan move back. Sam Breed's just enough of a utility player; he could move back, so it's definitely a possibility. So we go from the off season to kind of one of those where I'm kind of a little bit sad here. Is I'm a huge proponent of women's football. So for me, the AFLW is something I'm definitely interested in, but it is a little sad that the Swannies do not have a team. So from you, are you going to keep an eye on the AFLW season coming up this year? And are you excited to hopefully see the Swans get their license and join the comp here in the next few years?
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was watching, especially right before the shutdown, was AFLW. I've definitely been interested in it and watching all the different teams. And I'm glad that they got rid of the conference structure and that they're just going to have a straight ladder system. I think that the AFL's general investment in the women's game is great. I think it's a fantastic thing that they're giving all these different athletes a chance to be able to show how good they are and to be able to give women a chance to show that they can play football as well. And I think a lot of people in the US AFL have talked about it, that the style of play in AFLW is very similar to that in the US AFL, both men's and women's side of it, because it's a lot more, it's a little bit slower than the men's AFL game speed, so it's a little bit similar in that aspect. And I know that you had talked about this with a couple of other guys on your show about Danny Marshall. I think that that's just the coolest thing ever, just getting to see somebody starting at USAFL, getting to be able to go into AFLW and sign a contract, and then not only that, but actually get minutes. I mean, she kicked the goal with her first kick. I mean, that's so cool. And anybody who's involved in the USAFL will echo that sentiment that it's just so amazing to see. And she's not going to be the only one. I think that it's going to happen where we're going to get to see more, especially women from the USAFL, either straight out of the USAFL or perhaps female soccer players or rugby players or something like that. I think that we'll be able to see a lot more get that opportunity.
Yeah, I definitely think the USAFL is definitely a good pathway, especially if some of these clubs can continue to bring in collegiate athletes from the area, different stuff like that. And until all of the teams have their licenses, until you see more of these youth players, like I know Australia's youth women's programs have exploded. I heard one statistic at one time. The Geelong Football League down in Geelong saw a 300% expansion in girls footy under the age of 15 in the 2 years the AFLW had started at the time. Was it Western Australia saw a 200% increase. New South Wales saw a 200% increase. Victoria saw a 400% increase in women's footballers. So the talent is coming, but the thing is, it's going to take a little bit of time for it to mature. And I love, and I've said this argument to a lot of people, is I've seen people online, well, the game's boring in the AFLW. It's not as entertaining. It's not as scoring. Well, no offense, but go back and watch the AFL, go back and watch the VFL in 1898. Were they as talented as they are now? No. It takes a while to build up the talent. It takes a while to build up the coaching. It takes a while to build up the skills. These women are going to need time. It is not going to be up to AFL and AFL men's standards for the next 10 to 12 years. It's going to take a while to get all these young talent and more coaches into the women's system. And that's one of the things that I think why I want to use this platform as well, to promote women's footy, not only here in the States, but in Australia as well, because I think the women's game is going to get better. It needs time. It will take a little bit. This is a baby. It needs to grow up and mature. There's no rush. I understand that people want to see entertaining footy and they're used to watching the men's game, but the women's game will come the more time, the more coaching, and the more talent gets in there. They're still not full professionals either, so they don't have the full-on training that the men do. So,
I mean, and those who say that the women's game isn't as exciting as the men's, go back to this past year's final series before it got shut down, Collingwood versus North Melbourne. That game was electric.
mm-hmm.
It was a great game until the end.
Yep.
And the people that say that are the people that aren't paying attention and that don't give a crap.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're actually devoting time and watching the games, you're going to see that these women are extremely talented.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'd love to see some of these people who say it's boring I'd love to see some of them go out and kick a footy and run around for 80 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to see them try it. Because I know when I first started playing footy, I was like, oh my gosh, how are we able to keep going full contact for 20-minute quarters? I mean, how the heck do you do it?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's one of the things that kind of irritates me about people saying, oh, it's boring. Give me a break.
Yeah, well, and that's and it's ignorance, and most of the time, I'd almost even say it's the people that can't do it. And most of the time, they're the ones that complain. So we won't go into too much of a diatribe on that.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite questions I love asking, and you might have already discussed it. I'm wondering if this is going to be your answer. Favorite game you've ever seen, whether it is a Swans game, or if it's something else. Favorite game.
That I've seen or that I've like heard of.
Up to you.
I'm going to say the best game that I've ever actually seen, probably the 2018 grand final between Collingwood and West Coast. I mean, that's around the time that I really started to fully devote my time to watching AFL. And we all got together as a team for the Roosters, and we watched the game together and got to watch Mason Cox play in it. And just watching West Coast come back. I mean, I think most of us were all rooting for Collingwood to watch Mason Cox hopefully win the premiership, but that game just was incredible. And I mean, that last goal by Dom Sheed from the boundary, I mean, I play as a forward. That kick is so hard to make. And then throw in the fact that you got 100,000 people at the MCG watching. You're doing it like literally right with the Collingwood fans right there in your ear screaming at you. I mean, that whole game was just incredible. His favorite Swans game, probably the 2012 grand final, the one that got me really into footy. The first game that I watched. I mean, you gotta love seeing your team win the flag. And I mean, I know that I wasn't a fan at the time, but going back and watching that game over and over again, that one and the 2005 grand final, those two are really, really big.
Yeah, and the other thing too to add on to that Dom Sheed kick is the fact is it's also late in the fourth quarter, so your legs are tired.
Over Mason Cox,
Yep,
over a
over Mason.
6'11" guy. Yeah.
Yep. And he threads it almost needle perfect. It was absolutely an amazing kick. And I've seen the 2005 and 2012 grand finals in their full, and it is a different game than present day, but it's such a tough and rugged game. And it was kind of like you. It was one of the reasons I became a Swans fan. It was just watching that style. It was very much what I appreciated in football, as I loved the tough nature, the fact that I think Sydney in the 2012 laid over 100 tackles in that one game alone. But it is weird watching Buddy Franklin as a Hawthorn player.
It really is.
Every time I watch it, I'm just like, it throws me off because I'm so used to it.
This doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to say about Mason Cox, we heard rumors over the offseason that he was potentially going to get sent over to the Western Bulldogs. And I'm always going to be a Swans fan till the day I die.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have been so cool to have Mason playing for the men, Danny playing for the women.
Mm-hmm.
Western Bulldogs would have became America's team 100%. I would have been on board with that 100%.
Yeah, I got a few people online that were quite interested in that. But did you actually hear there were rumors at one time Sydney was looking at him?
Yeah, I did see that. I was like,
well,
maybe I don't know. It would be cool, but I don't know.
I've said the story before. I had a few of my Swans friends who I have on Twitter who are in Australia. They reached out to me. They're like, "What do you think? Would you want the American?" And I'm like, "No." I'm like, I love Mason. He's a great player. I like him at Collingwood because he's a forward. We've already got Sam Reid and Lance Franklin, who are injury-prone forwards. I don't need a third one. Cox is not going to play ruck most of the time.
That's the thing. Like
a 50-50 ruck guy. So
if Mason was a full-time ruck and he was a pretty good tier ruckman,
mm-hmm.
Yes, 100%.
I agree.
But the fact that he plays more as a forward just wouldn't fit right now.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that we've already got two injury-prone talls there who are out of the lineup there for a while, and it's like,
And
I,
those two talls are two of the only talls that we even have in the first place. Yeah.
unfortunately, yeah. So it's like like I said, I respect Mason Cox. I love him. I love that he's an American. I
He's a
cheer
great
for
guy.
him. I cheer
Met
for
him met
him.
him at 2018 Nationals. He's a really really nice guy.
Yeah, and everything that I've heard, he's a great dude. But it's kind of one of those. I'm like, as a Swans fan, because of what we needed, it wasn't for me. Like I said, all due respect and all the good to him, but not so much. So, Brad, this has been an amazing conversation. I mean, you and I chat all the time off mic, but it was kind of cool to have this conversation on mic and to be able to chat my team a little bit without having to feel like I'm being too homerish. I
Yeah, exactly.
try not to throw in too much Swan stuff when I talk to some of the other people, and this has been so much fun. So it's been a pleasure, sir. If you want, you have any social medias in case there's any other Swans fans that are out there that you can promote, so we can get you some more Swans supporters, anything like that. It's up to you.
Yeah, I'm not on social media. Kind of trying to like detox in that aspect, but yeah, it's always good to see fellow Sydney fans. So if you're in the United States and if you're into footy, hope to maybe see you around at nationals whenever that can get back around, or a regional tournament or any time. If you're an American listening to these shows and you're interested in footy, give it a try. It is so worth it. It is so much fun. You're going to meet a whole bunch of great people. Like my teammates in Des Moines, they're fantastic. Would love to get back together with them and run out on the field and again and be able to hit some people. So it's a great time. If you have the chance, take it.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. If you're catching this and you're going, usafl.com is definitely a great place to find out if you got a club close to you. And if you're interested, you can even start a club wherever you are. So this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you again, Brad, and you all, everybody, have a nice night.